Hi, welcome to the second episode of Chiratae Women's Trailblazers. In this episode, we will be speaking with Kavitha Iyer Rodrigues, founder and CEO of Zumutor and Gowri Mukherjee, co-founder and CEO of CreditMantri. Kavitha, Gowri, thanks for taking time to share your journey. And so it will be great if you can start with your current avatar as an entrepreneur of your respective companies. Kavitha, you want to go first?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, TCM. Thanks, Gowri, for being on this chat with TCM. And I'm sure it's going to be fun. And I found the first episode to be very, very actually inspiring also. Thanks, TCM. My name is Kavitha Iyer and I'm founder CEO of Zumutor. This is my second startup. The first one was a biosimilar company that I did between 2007 and 2012. And I sold it to a listed pharma company in Bangalore. And this venture is now 10 years old. It is VC invested by multiple institutional investors who are based out of Bangalore and the US. And we have built out one of India's first key credible stories in the novel drug development space. And we have our lead asset going into a phase 1 clinical trials in the US. So that's a little bit about the company. And yeah, during this chat, I'll tell you a little bit about myself too. Thanks. Over to you, Gowri.
Hey, thanks, Kavitha. Thanks, TCM. So my name is Gowri. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CreditMantri. CreditMantri is a fintech company which is focused on helping consumers and small businesses improve their credit health. And in order to do this, what we do is get consumers and small businesses on our platform, help them understand the status of their credit health. And once they understand the status of the credit health, we help them to come up with solutions which will help them to either improve their score or correct the score. So that's the core of what we do. We have about 15 million consumers registered on our platform, and we work with 50 plus lenders on the supply side across both sourcing, recoveries, and a whole host of things. I spent a lot of time in banking prior to getting started with CreditMantri. So that's what we do at CreditMantri and what I do there.
Thank you, Kavitha. Thank you, Gowri. I just want to start off with this question that, you all are from, South Indian families, right? So where possibly high education followed by that, going and working somewhere is normally the norm, right? And but you both have chosen to also dabble into entrepreneurship. So it'll be good to hear about what made you think about starting as an entrepreneur, and what are the enabling factors for that, and what is the initial reaction from the family?
Gowri, you first.
You were okay, fine, happy to do that. So I grew up in a traditional South Indian household. Grew up my parents made sure that math was important. My mother is a maths professor, and music was very important. So I learned, I was sent to very many classes, Carnatic, Bharatanatyam, Veena, so name it. And, I think my parents did their best to put me through it. So very traditional household, educational, like TCM said, was really important. And, there was no choice really, you better get it done. And my father, though, is an entrepreneur. So he actually started a manufacturing company when he was 55 years old, which was a rarity when I almost finished B school. So I did my engineering, then did my MBA. And when I started working was when my father decided that he wanted to do something, on his own. So which was quite a different path. So it was not that I was unfamiliar with the risks associated with entrepreneurship. I never saw it as something risky, to be honest. It just seemed as something logical to do, having garnered some skills at some point of time. And on a professional front, I spent a lot of time on the banking side, and digital was something that I kind of took to. I like the cusp of business and technology, and having been in the early internet digital payments adoption cycle, always wanted to do a startup. From a timing point of view, it was more determined by, how safe we felt. At the end of the day, come from a traditional family. And my husband and I, both of us felt that, we had 2 kids. We had to make sure that, we had enough going to put them through school, college, etc. So he is an entrepreneur as well. So it was important that, we timed it in a manner that we didn't put everything at risk. So that's really what got me into entrepreneurship. So what I did in the past really influenced the final choice of what I ended up doing.
So interesting. Yeah. That is really interesting, Gowri. I like the way you kind of layered it right, and it's quite. If I had to tell youngsters anything, that is the story I would tell. Kind of, make sure that there is some kind of cushion to the risk somewhere. Yeah. So mine's slightly different and similar to Gowri by means of the fact that typical Tamram family always has this, and that too my parents were professors in IIM Bangalore. So this whole education piece of it was very important both for me and my younger sister. So, and she's a doctor, and so kind of continuing on after a master's into a PhD program and go forth with it was kind of cards were laid out like that. But I think things started in a different way for me. I graduated in 2001 and I wrote my GRE, and 2001 is when Twin Towers, everything. So I knew I'm not going to get a visa to go and do kind of a PhD program, and so I joined industry. I joined Biocon by the end of 2001, and that's really where my professional journey started. So so my folks were like, yeah, okay, fine, you didn't land exactly like we would have thought with regard to the next consequential thing, but this is fine, and it's in Bangalore, it's safe, etc. Right? I think that was the first, break with regard to what I did in biotech. Biocon was a great experience with regard to all that happened, which kind of built a base for me with now what I'm doing. And I would always wish that folks, kind of spent some time in industry like that before they kind of started out their own course. I think that amount of kind of grunt work is required. So post that, when I spent some amount of time, in kind of in another biotech company, etc. The first startup idea, kind of was cooking with regard to what was missing. And at that point, the choice was, did you really want to do like a problem solving kind of thing, risk everything at stake, instead of just continuing on, right, with pharma, biopharma that was there existing in Bangalore? I think at that point is when my folks, my husband, etc., said, if this is really what you want to do, I think you should go for it now. Now better than later. And that's how the first startup was born in 2007. And it is really funny because I was also pregnant with my child. And so the startup and my first kid was at the same time. And that brings me to other interesting stories, but that's really how it started. And typically one startup, and then the next thing you're doing is that if you do have a somewhat decent exit, you're thinking about the next one. And so that's how the second startup happened. So that's a bit of a background. And my parents continue to say that, my daughters don't know something like carpentry or something, so they should continue in biotech. So whatever they do, they should land well. So they always had this thought that if it is not entrepreneurship, you should have something solid that you always went back to, right? But I think the space and time right now is very different for folks who are coming out of the space. Number one, I think the ecosystem is very, very agile with regard to, kind of funding entrepreneurs and opportunities for entrepreneurs in multiple facets, right? Multiple domains. So I think it's a different domain now, a different phase now.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Kavitha, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur, right? So once you had an exit, I remember a lot of entrepreneurs saying that I spent so much time after getting acquired, right? And it's almost like talking about the jail term, right? And they want to get out, and then they want to again be an entrepreneur. So, so doing it the
like one fixed after the other. Yeah.
So that is a very interesting thing. And Gowri, one of the things that what I have seen is that entrepreneurship is a very intense activity, whatever you take up, it is like, I always used to say, and you have heard me say this, that entrepreneurs are 25/8, right? And they are not 8/25. And so how are you able to manage in terms of balancing? And on top of it, um, how do you manage to get some time for yourself, right? It is also very, very intense activity. So to that extent, you need to recharge yourself. So what do you do for that?
Okay. So it is intense. It is intense. If there was one thing that I always thought I was hardworking. I always thought I was a highly intense. I did whatever I did wholeheartedly, 24/7 in my corporate job. And then entrepreneurship came. And then I realized literally that it is quite a different ride. But I, honestly speaking, tremendously enjoyed it. I like the sense of ownership. I like the integrity of being an entrepreneur, in the sense it really tests every single thing of what I really believe to what I really, act on. And I think I enjoy that process. I've always also felt that I have two kids. My older daughter is 18, my son is 15. And, I started out when my daughter was, was probably 12 years old and my son was 9. So it was one of those years, important years, hard to tell which year is more important. But, this work-life balance, I always feel is a very overrated thing. It's not possible to kind of optimize on, it's not something one optimizes on an hourly basis, daily basis, or a weekly basis. I feel that when you look at work and life balance as a longer continuum, I have had phases where it's very intense for 6 months and then it cools off. And I think when you see work-life balance in longer stretches of time, I feel that it's a lot more sensible, because there are certain things in life which are absolutely priority. And whether entrepreneurship, work, you just have to put energy behind it. And there are certain times at work when 100% effort needs to go into work at the sole, focus of work alone, at the exclusion of everything else. So when I see it in longer periods of time, I think I'm able to make more sense out of it. So that's really how I've kind of tried to balance it out. It helped that I have a support system. My parents live literally next door. And I didn't have to worry about dropping my kids there, what will happen when they came back home. Both my husband and I keep quite long hours. So we're just kind of used to the kids growing up in a broadly, extended family and not really worrying about what happens to them. And I think that we've been big beneficiaries of that. And to the point on how do I refresh myself, I go for a walk, usually end of the day. I wrap the day with a long walk. Usually it's about an hour and a half. I listen to whatever music, whatever podcasts, or whatever videos I want to listen to. And I find that it helps clear my day quite a bit, and it clears my head. And I really look forward to that solo time.
Yeah. Kavitha, you are a, triathlon athlete, right? Ultra marathoner. And, how do you see, these two? That is again a very, very time consuming journey, right? And you will also go through the ups and downs in that, right? Just along with entrepreneurship, which again has the, so how do you see that helping you?
Right. No, so I think for me, sport has been a very important part of my growing up. Like I was a gymnast when I was young, I was a swimmer, etc. So sport has played a very key and kind of a central role in what I've done, even through my journey of studying, etc. So when it came to, kind of work life, like you mentioned, and like Gowri mentioned, I think it's overrated by means of a word, by means of saying balance, because it's just so intertwined and intermingled, especially in a startup, right? Or in an entrepreneurial journey. You don't know where one starts and the other ends, right? It's a bit of a blur. So I think I use that blur to my advantage, right? Like, it gives me the opportunity to do things like I can cycle to work, shower there, and then I can run back, right? And things like that. So I used to do that a couple of times when I was training for a couple of these triathlons. But I think running as a journey has kept me very centered in a lot of ways. It's quite meditative, and the longer the runs, the slower that you are, the more endurance that you have. It's kind of akin to what is required in a startup, this kind of endurance. And so that helped me. So fitness is a part of it. So that part of it is taken care of. I think the other portion that a sport, along with, kind of having it with professionally what's going on and taking it seriously, is that you meet some amazing people. And those people have remained friends for life. And some of them have actually become investors in my company. So there are jokes where like, is Kavitha going to run or is she pitching? so there's those portions of it, which I think have worked well. And I'm really very fortunate and blessed to have some really good friends. And the other part of it is it's gotten family along with it, right? So when we run, we hike, we camp, all of it, family is involved. And so that becomes a time with them. And the last part is, I think the startup that, kind of we've built over 10 years, they're a set of folks who are highly motivated, and they're also extremely sporty. We go for these really exciting, kind of climbing pieces. We do a lot of, pre-COVID, of course, we did a lot of outbounds that were very, very adventurous. So I think that persona kind of intermingles with that. And that's kept us in good stead. Yeah. So that's a roundabout answer to you, but that's how it is.
Yeah, Kavitha, and also in the biotechnology field where there is it's a very long journey, right? And it's at least a decade in terms of getting a new molecule out. And, that actually is more like running a marathon, right? Or maybe even ultra marathon. So that actually relates. And like you said, it's more akin to that, builds endurance and then discipline and all of those things. Yeah, but in the entrepreneurship journey, you go through ups and downs, right? So, can you actually possibly share with the audience in terms of, a high and another big challenge or something that you've never done that, and how have you faced it? How have you overcome that? That'll be good for others to learn from. And Gowri, if you can go first.
Got it. I think let me start with probably the part that was the most challenging. The highs are always easier to talk about. The COVID was a really tough phase for us. Literally for the business that we are in, we are consumer facing, number one. Number two, we work with lenders and credit literally disappeared. So we are a business which has 3 lines of business, and literally one business, evacuated from the platform. So nobody was disbursing loans. And so it's like suddenly revenues, more than a third of our revenues disappeared. We were sitting on a cost base. And it was not that, we were sitting on loads of, huge runway that was giving us enough time to extend. We had just turned profitable. So it is quite a bummer, because you've turned profitable. You're beginning to feel that, from here on, let's begin to grow. And then this kind of took the wind out of our sails. So that was a really tough phase. And we needed to do a couple of things, which was around rally the team around, reorganize the team to make sure that we are able to address the new requirements of the market, and try to scale revenue from the 2 lines of business that we were left with, because the other one was clear it's going to take some time for new credit and disbursals to come back. So that reorganization, doing it remote, not being able to do this with the team, and literally having conference call where you're having 20 people, you're talking about the reorg, you're talking about how people will have new roles, was actually quite a difficult phase. And I remember I used to have a sore throat at the end of each day. This was literally talking for, 9 to 10 hours with various people. And it was not easy because I was doing it at home. And my kids were privy to what was happening, everybody at home. And people would walk up and my kids would say, what's going on? You're going on talking. I can see your voice is raised, your voice is, so is everything okay? Is everything okay? So that was a really tough phase. The good part of it was, I think we landed well. One of the businesses really picked up, of the 2 businesses that we had to scale, one literally, scaled, and even post-COVID continued to grow. And the third business came back in. So post-COVID was a really nice phase. And I think somewhere along the way, the strength of having gone through this, I felt, gave me a lot of confidence in being able to say, we can deal with, there is something that one can figure out a way as a team to deal with it. Reflecting back, if I were to look at what worked with the team, because we didn't have attrition at that point of time, obviously, but we didn't have anybody questioning us, or, I really felt we took the team along. And that was simply because I think all of us spoke very openly and vulnerability about the fact that we know this, we are able to see this, we don't know this, but let's try. And I think if I were to reflect on it, I think that's really what helped us through that phase. The high, of course, was the coming back. Like I said, the new business, the business on the recovery side really picked up. The new credit business also picked up. So on the back of COVID, we have seen growth in, significant growth in revenues. We've grown 2x, growth in profitability. So it's been a good phase. And touch wood, hopefully, I think Indian economy will continue to do, and demand for credit stays the way it is. So that's,
Yeah,
my story on good and bad.
Kavitha?
Yeah, thanks, Gowri. That's a really strong one. And I think mine is also kind of similar. Pre-COVID was a very different phase, right? Things were going on with Zumutor with regard to product development. And our story of product development is always one of those where you burn a lot of money, right? There's a high risk, high reward game, and therefore you have to keep on with it. And then you will see certain milestones, so to speak, or certain outcomes, which are very long drawn out, but they would be there. So we were pretty sure we were on the track for an IND filing, a start of phase 1, etc. In 2019, by 20, we should have, kind of filed, we should have started clinical trials, etc. And then COVID comes along, right? And, everything is shut. We could not work in our labs, and for us, physically working in our labs is an important piece of, the work that we do. So it was not even one of those things where you could do this remote, right? And I think that was a key character building point where not only for our team, we also saw something very important, right? We always thought our investors were all about, yeah, sure, they don't understand our game, but, they've given us the money, they're responsible for investor money, etc. Sure, we're responsible for investor money. But what we saw in investors when COVID hit was something amazing, at least my set of investors, is that they were very clear. They said, okay, this is happening. Please retain the team, because the team is very important as you do product development. And this will pass. Let's do something that kind of sustains you guys. And then, you would go through. So I am really blessed and grateful to have investors like the way I have. And I do have 6 investors on my board. And I think that was one learning also, right? This mentorship that we received during COVID. The other part of it was, which is a dichotomy, and it's kind of ironic, is biotech saw the biggest boom, right? It, unseen valuations, absolutely bizarre numbers, kind of billions invested into biotech. It doesn't matter what people were starting up or doing. If you said biotech, there would be money there, right? Things like that. So I think it reached a really insane and, kind of unrealistic high. And we were not a part of that wave, right? That's the ironic part. We were not ready. We were not ready to raise money at that point because we did not have our product at the right, kind of time point to raise money. So ironically, we didn't get on that wave, which also meant we lost time, and we didn't have money raised during that period of time where, you could have capitalized on a lot. We didn't have that. So I think there was a lot happening, and I really want to say investors, our families, the team, all of it kind of came together in a nice way. We took care of our employees. They in turn trusted us. They in turn stayed along. So we did not have any attrition during COVID. Post-COVID, everybody was jumping around, but during COVID, everything was fine. And I think there is importance to what were happening to families and how we kind of held it together. So that was a good learning point. Post that, in the company itself, from a product development standpoint, we did raise another round much later after COVID. We continued development, and the high is that we're probably the only Indian company having a first-in-class asset in what we do, which is now having a complete US granted IP, right? And so there's a lot that went into it over the years, And so, so for us, we're very proud to say that we have reached this milestone despite the lows of COVID, despite the lows of money always being a challenge and time, right? So all of that. So those are the two contrasting pieces.
Wow.
Yeah. Kavitha, the previous company you exited to a strategic investor, and at that time, what thoughts you went through in terms of selling a company is a big thing, right? In terms of, and that to the first company. So what thoughts you went through? What were the challenges or something that others could learn from?
I think every startup is like a baby. You always hope that it lands well and in the best of hands, and it grows well. So for the first company in BioPro, I think it saw all the trials and tribulations of what a startup was in the biopharma space in 2007, which means very early in the game, right? So we were early movers. We also had some experience with co-development, licensing, etc., which we brought to the table. So when we finally did the strategic merger and finally the buyout, I think we had a lot in the learning by means of the leadership itself, because when they were strategic partners with us, I think there was a distinct leadership style which augured pretty well, right? With kind of big pharma, trying to kind of dictate a pipeline, which is very important because they had the right kind of product market fit. So I think we with the strategic alignment that we did with this pharma company, one was, I think, the vision with regard to where the startup would go, and therefore it made it easier for us to transition out like that. And today, I'm really happy and proud they actually got a European approval for one of the products that we had developed. So that's really nice. So those are the kind of things that leaves us in good stead now. But I still remember 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, when you hand over your laptop and you hand over everything, including the team, it's like starting at ground zero again. And it was one of those things where you're excited, but at the same time, quite vulnerable, thinking, can you pull this off again? Will it be like this, or will it be quite different? So there's a mix of like this crazy bravery and some amount of reality. I think those were the emotions there. Yeah.
Yeah. Gowri, having two entrepreneurs in a house, right, is a very different challenge, right? Or opportunity, whichever way you look at it. So anything that you feel, and today actually there are many households who will have two entrepreneurs at home, right? Both spouses being actively in entrepreneurship. So what are the challenges that come with it, and what are the good things that come with it?
The biggest challenge is when we travel, we are carrying 4 laptops. It's a headache. But honestly, I think both of us have personalities where we don't like to discuss work at home. And I think it's probably a defense mechanism, because I think we're thinking about work anyway all the time. And so to come home and discuss what happened at work with somebody at home is literally, honestly, for me, it's the last thing I want to do. And I can quite see that with Surojit as well. He doesn't really discuss much of what happens at work, but we get the problems, right? We get it in a pretty, so there is no question of, it's, a lot of women go through a fair amount of pressure about expectations. So I think it really helps to have, a partner who's an entrepreneur. When I wasn't an entrepreneur, though I grew up in in my father is an entrepreneur, first generation. And I used to work in a corporate job. A lot of times I remember telling my husband, you have to figure out a way to manage time. We can't be spending Sunday afternoon when you're on a phone call. Saturday when we're on a holiday, he'll be on these constant phone calls. And I said, you got to figure this out, get your life organized, get your time sorted. And then when I kind of, got into it, I think he literally had the last laugh. So it really helps to have a partner who understands, and therefore in a manner which is not, how do I say, there are no subtle pressures or expectations, and that's quite liberating, literally. So I think it is more of a plus, but we'll rarely discuss work. So
Interesting.
that's the deal that we struck.
Yeah. And, entrepreneurship itself is tough. But as a woman entrepreneur, have you faced challenges which are unique or which are more than what, let's say, your other peers who would have gone through?
Actually, this is a tough topic. And I think somewhere, and I don't know what you feel, Kavitha, it's like you've grown up. At least, I've grown up not allowing myself to question things, saying, are you getting this because you're a woman? Or are you not getting this because you're a woman? Somewhere, even that line of questioning feels wrong, right? And I think it's simply an inability to therefore perceive. And I think it's a weakness that I have. I simply struggle to perceive, am I getting this because I'm a woman is a question I have. But at the same time, if I'm denied something, I have a tendency to blame it on, maybe you're not good enough, or maybe there's something wrong with you, and not try to, put it into gender. And I think that's an instantaneous reaction simply to, the circumstances or, how I grew up. And I think it's taken me a lot of effort. I've not necessarily managed to do this to say, if I fail, am I giving gender as a reason, right? If I'm not happy with a fundraise, if I'm not happy with something, can I say that it's a woman, or am I really, kind of hiding behind the truth of it has nothing to do with you being a woman, it's to do with your competence? I honestly don't have answers to that. But what I do feel is being a woman, in India, there's a lot of respect for tough women. And unlike I find in Western markets where, there are notions, I feel in India,
right,
literally, across, when you're a tough woman, you're taking some of these choices. I feel that a lot of men around rally in a very, and people I work with, my colleagues, my office people, I've never had a challenge to kind of have anybody questioning me just because I was a woman. So I think those are my experiences.
And Kavitha?
Yeah, very, very well put, Gowri, and I agree with Gowri. It's a very nuanced topic, right? Gender, and gender has played such a pivotal role, like across centuries. I mean, forget entrepreneurship, from civilizations to war to politics to everything. So I think it's no different with entrepreneurship, but I think it's nuanced from the way and the context of what you are doing, right? Like, for example, in let's say tech spaces, like let's say for now I'll just say Gowri's in tech because it's fintech, and I'm in biotech. It's slightly different because the kind of competencies and expertise that you bring to the table have already gone through various levels of filtration, right? Because you should have arrived at that stage because you're on top of the game by means of competency, or you're hired like that and you've come there. So that's already done. I think with women, and I agree with the one point that Gowri made, I think in India, it's slightly different and better. And the more I experience it, because I have a cross-border company being Boston and Bangalore based, I see it out there. It's an extremely tough space. The only experience that I have is in the US. It's an extremely tough space. And I think they have it harder than us. From in many angles, including kind of support at home, right? I think we're very privileged, very blessed to have the kind of support that we have, and I understand. I think not many women might have it, but I definitely think it is a better space. Of course, acknowledging that I do come from a place of privilege by means of being supported by family, which is, kind of really close to me. They're intricately involved with the business that I have and do and constantly encourage, etc. The point that I have with women in entrepreneurship and the fact that we actually use like a gender card like that is that it. I think Gowri mentioned this. It's not a token to get ahead, right? And if you fail, it's not a card that you use saying, I failed because of this, right? It can't be just used either way. It's just that certain things like the companies that we are in tech, it should not be based on gender. It's just based on what you deliver, the company that you've built, what it's supposed to do, right? I think that's the core crux of it. in my own experience, I've been very, very, very privileged, like I said, in having guidance, in having support, in having a lot of things around me. So I can always speak from a point of strength, but I know there are others who can't. And there has to be some enablement techniques. And those techniques, I think, are getting visibility now. And I think it's also our turn to kind of put it out there and help a whole bunch of folks. And help has to be in a different way. It's not, trying to say that let's create more women's schemes. That's not necessarily the way it works. That's my opinion on that.
No, very interesting. In fact, in our office, when these discussions take place, again, the key message that we got is don't look at it any differently. It has to be on merits. It has to be on not based on gender. But that is for people who have come from a certain background, achieved something, right? But there is a whole lot of people who do not get that opportunity because of where they are. Maybe because of, their maybe the family status or some of those things, or some geographies. Okay. And that is where I think this whole thing about, creating a gender equality and others coming about. But at the same time, the common refrain I have heard is don't do anything special because, I'm a woman. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. But obviously entrepreneurship is new, right? I don't think the same ratio plays out in the entrepreneurship. So, if let us say a young woman comes to you and asks for entrepreneurship, I want to start entrepreneurship, what will be your advice to me? What would that be?
I think wholeheartedly go for it. No question. I think it makes, I think at the end of the journey or through the journey, it just makes the individual so much more self-aware, so much more grounded in reality. So literally, if, I think somebody came and said, whether entrepreneurship or corporate path, I would say pick the entrepreneurship path, because at the end of it, it's a tougher path, probably financially more rewarding, but most importantly, I feel it's a path of self-discovery, which is so much better. So I would actively encourage anybody who has it in them, even 1%, to do this. It just makes them better people.
Yeah. So my take on it is slightly different, right? So, and I've seen this happen in my space more so. And I tell people who come to me, the first thing I ask them is, are you rock solid in your space, competency wise? Like, don't get anything that's half-baked, right? Saying that you'll build it out as you evolve in the cycle of things. It's a little tough because it's an extremely competitive space out there, right? You don't want to be an also-ran kid. You want to do this impactfully, significantly, and like your life depends on it, right? So you better do things that, like I say, like prepping for a marathon. You better have put in the miles. Otherwise, don't show up at the start line just because you think you're very brave, right? Put in what it takes, right? And then arrive at the start point. That's what, I tell, which is also, I guess, what Gowri is saying, but from a perspective of assuming that you're thorough, right? And you're there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, when we are talking about between entrepreneurs and an investor, it's not over until, this whole journey with even investors take place. And I always joke these days saying that, look, the journey of investing in any company is say 5-7 years or sometimes longer, which may be longer than today's marriages, right? So in terms of the energy, the intent that goes into it is very important. So, happy to hear your views. Both of you have had multiple investors. You would have heard stories about how other situations are playing out. Anything that you think investors could do better?
Yeah, that's okay. 3 things for TCM to do
It's
better.
a trick question.
No, honestly, I think in many ways, I feel blessed to have the kind of investors we have, the great sounding board. At times when, it's a lot like, to me, it's been an experience of not just financially, being invested. There have been times when there have been questions about the direction the company should take. There have been questions around emotionally just sounding off, with, talking about a certain situation with someone. And I think, the great support from the investors we have from TCM in terms of being there to kind of pick up the call 9:45, 10 in the night, have a, quick chat, and it helps clear head. And I think that I really want to, and it's not just about the money. And I genuinely feel, and it's not about, understanding of the domain. I think it's the entire package of understanding the journey, understanding the stage, understanding the market, and understanding self-doubt, and making sure, and to be able to talk through that. I think I have many moments and many instances that I'm sure I think TCM will also remember. I think a lot to thank for, and honestly, thanks for your time, TCM, for that.
Thank you. Gowri, good thing is that we also go through self-doubts. So to that extent, we can relate to that. We may come out as saying that we know all the answers, but many times we also go through self-doubt. Yeah.
So I'll take that cue on that and build on self-doubt. And this is what I think investors should do, right? I think the current breed of investors that we have, and we are very lucky to have so many of them on our board, right? And like you already mentioned, Gowri, and I said before, right? They have really shown, really strength of character and mentorship with how they have handled teams, companies, founders, all the trials and tribulations that happen, which is actually far away from anything to do with tech or the company. It has so much to do with just people and relationships and things like that. I think they have handled it and they've come out on top of it. I think every startup that they handle, they know better and better, and stuff like that, which is great, right? And I have true respect for them. And I hope after this startup, I join the VC world. Let's see how that goes, right? But I think in my space, TCM in biotech, I really think investors in India should hire folks in the biotech space, right? The knowledge around what you want to invest in, what pieces you want to invest in. If you don't hire in that space, right, and build out a competency, you will never uncover opportunities that possibly investments can be made, right? That cycle is a mature cycle in the US, right? Which you see, there's a lot of, biotech, in Boston, every square inch, there's somebody invested in biotech, right? Even kids know which stock to buy in biotech kind of thing. So that is very second nature to them there. Now, I'm saying we don't emulate that. I'm just saying, let's just get some good learnings from that, right? From the fact that there are areas of investment and opportunities in India that investors have played to very well. They have built out the ecosystem. It's bustling. It's growing. It's great. Given today's kind of macroeconomics of how various things are collapsing, India stood out pretty well. And I'm glad, and I'm hoping we will kind of surface out of this kind of lull. We're doing pretty well. I think investors can put in this effort into building out such competencies, and therefore it's a very FOMO effect among investors, right? If you start investing in a particular thing, everybody invests in that space. And so that's one key thing that I have. But otherwise, I echo what you're saying, Gowri. I mean, I am the person I am today over the 10 years with Zumutor or the previous company, also because of the kind of people who've mentored me, right? And that's been very key to I think, one, growing up and growing within this, and also kind of embedding this culture, right? I think that's been very important. So thank you.
Yeah. And Kavitha, if you were to say, let's say a woman leader, globally or in India, you look up to, who inspires you, who you like to emulate, who would that?
There are a lot of people, but since I come from biotech, I really think Kiran has done an outstanding job, in the space. She's absolutely self-made. with regard to what the company that she's built. I've been very fortunate to spend some time there, and I've built out some great relationships with people who continue to do startups now, and I'm within that ecosystem. So that's one of the people I can think about. Yeah.
And Gowri?
TCM, I wish I could say there was one person or a one woman leader. It's just that I think I've kind of, there are just so many of them, and you pick up so many different areas that each one seems to do a good job. I used to have a manager in my second job where who was just outstanding in the way she used to pitch. She was on the sales side, and she was really hardworking, would work 10, 11-hour days, would go back home, cook, and celebrate if it is a special occasion, she'd make a full meal for that festival. So to me it was like and here I was, not married, barely eating out every single day. So I think I've just met extraordinary women who on the work front, a lot of people that on the banking side, we had a lot of women leaders who have done exceptionally well. And many of them good in various ways. So hard to put finger and say this is the one person that inspires me. But I really feel even the one kind of woman that totally inspires me is the day-to-day, working in a call center, working in a tough job, taking a train or a bus, which is a long ride in the morning, getting to work, cooking, bringing food from home cooked, traveling all the way back, and then having to cook at home. I think those women are truly inspirational because it is sheer hard work and energy that takes to put the family and work together. So if I had one inspiration to say, that is discipline, that is a cornerstone, I think that is fantastic. And we have so many of them in our office. So hats off to all of them.
That's great, Kavitha and Gowri. Thanks for taking time. And it was very inspirational. Sure. I'm sure the audience will also enjoy it. And thanks for taking time.